Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I'm your host, MGCovers. This is episode 73. Happy Wednesday, hump day. Sorry I'm late getting the podcast out. We had some major construction here, actually on my apartment building. They were literally like sawing into the building. So it was like extremely noisy the last 2 days. And my landlord told me they would be finished yesterday. And a lot of times when Dominicans say they're going to be finished, you can generally add a week or maybe 2 or 3 days. But in this case, it was correct and they actually finished. So it's quiet. We can record a podcast. Super excited about this podcast. We have a ton of information to cover. Super excited. I'm high on caffeine this morning. I've been up since 4:35 working on college football model and really excited about that. We're going to launch that. We already had one play last week, played against UNLV. UNLV was had delayed. The line was UNLV minus 30. We played it at plus 31 for Idaho State, and UNLV was minus 31. And I'll explain that, show you that in great detail. So we started off the college football season with a win and super excited about that. We had a major breakthrough in soccer, which is going to dominate probably the majority of this podcast, but I will talk about the NCAA football model here at the end of the podcast, show you some examples, might even give you a preview of some plays. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to sort of kick off the season, might have a live college football preview show tomorrow night. Is today Wednesday? Yeah, we actually have games tomorrow night. So we'll have plays tomorrow night, do a college football preview show on Thursday, and then turn around and do one on Saturday. I did this in the old days where I would do a preview of every single game, maybe seeing how my audience and subscribers respond to some long form content, because that'd probably be well over an hour if we preview every single game on Saturday, but I think I'm going to do it. And then maybe have a live show at least once a week, maybe do like a Thursday kickoff show or give out a few plays, maybe a few plays for Saturday, because looking at the way this model is turning out, it's going to be a lot of volume. And I'm really excited about that. So anyway, major breakthrough in soccer. And I want to talk about this because if you follow me, you know, I'm infatuated with this classes model. It's a very different approach to modeling, but it's extremely effective in understanding how to build it. And it can create a ton of value and make you a ton of money, I feel like, in the future. So let's dive into it and we'll talk about a major breakthrough that I found in soccer. So, all right, first off, ChatGPT. I have another client using Claude. I have one of my best friends told me about Perplexity. In my opinion, to be successful in modeling in sports betting, sports handicapping in the future, you will have to use one of those sources, because the amount of progress in this new angle I found on soccer early in the week was a result of working with ChatGPT. Sure, I could have done it on my own, but what happens with ChatGPT, it expedites the process, because the way you're looking at numbers, and you've seen me make videos in the past where I'll say, hey, here's what the model looks like. What changes can you make to make this profitable? Well, ChatGPT does that instantly. So rather than you racking your brain trying to figure it out, it can sort it and identify, quote, systems, or, hey, you need to play it this way, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll show you that in this video, in this podcast, but it just does it a lot faster. So if you're not doing that, then obviously you're going to get left behind. And also too, what I think is going to be extremely valuable, let's say we run into the situation I ran in this year with baseball, extremely profitable last 2 years. We get stuck. It's not profitable. It was basically hovering around even there to, right around in May, we had a profitable preseason, which was wild, playing sides and totals. So what I could have done is sent that information to ChatGPT. Hey, analyze this. This was profitable earlier. What angles, or do you see that we can make it profitable? And it would probably have expedited the process and maybe even produced a better model. And I know now that it's capable of doing that. So extremely excited. You're going to have to do that. You're going to have to subscribe to one of these services. It's free. There is a free service, but it will limit you. And any of those services, Claude, ChatGPT is $20. I know that. And then Perplexity, I think they're all around the same. All right. So here's what I got. I took my classes model and I told ChatGPT to generate the projected win percentage based on the model and based on the statistical properties of soccer. So soccer is a three-way line. What we noticed, A teams win 65% of the time. So immediately laying minus 300, minus 400, no longer going to do that, because at best it's 65%. So I think that equates to, what's that, maybe like a 170 minus 180 line just to break even. B classes and C classes win 41 to 39% of the time. And then fading a, quote, D class is a pretty solid play. D classes only winning 26% of the time. Now, the next chart I'm going to show you is huge. All right. So what you're looking at now, so I took the results of the entire soccer log, and then I already knew the statistical properties of soccer. And if you're listening to this podcast for the first time and you're asking, what is a statistical property? It is a term that I came up with. And what it means is facts, or a sum of facts about that particular sport. For example, a statistical property in college football, home teams win 70% of the time. I didn't say cover, I said win. So teams are relatively even via your power rankings, and there's a dog that's at home. Playing that team on the money line is generally a good play per se. So when you're handicapping, you need to align your wagers and your handicapping modeling in conjunction with the statistical properties of that sport. Underdogs in NHL and Major League Baseball cash 40% of the time. In NBA, it's only 30% of the time. So if you were going to, hey, I'm going to create this money line dog NBA system, going to be very difficult to do. Why? Money line dogs only cash 30% in the NBA. So that's my point. So when you look at soccer, what do we know about soccer? I'll give you a summation. Home teams win more than any other side. There's 3 lines in soccer: home, draw, and away. Drawn away, relatively close. Sometimes some leagues, the draw is 25 to 30%, and sometimes that's the same with the away side, 25 to 30%. So what ChatGPT did for me, we take a look at this sort of metric here. It shows each class playing against each other, A class versus A class away, B, C, and D for every class. So we have every possible combination of classes playing each other. And immediately, what do you notice? The home side, which we already knew. I had another model where we just played home teams. And look at these numbers. A home class against away A class. The away class that's A only has, factoring in statistical properties, a 26% chance of winning. The home A class has a 45% chance of winning. Okay? So let's do this. Let me show you an example so that we can have immediate application of this. So let's take a look at 2 A class teams playing over the weekend via the model. Now, I didn't wager this, but we just tracked it. All right, hopefully you can see this on the screen. This is Lille from the French League. They were an A class team playing Monaco. Monaco was an A class team. Even though I had them both A class, the difficulty, I've said this before, another way to classify this game, this will be a 50-50 game. Books have to make one the favorite, one the dog. In this case, they made Monaco the favorite. Monaco was plus 110 away. Look at what Lille was at home, A class team, plus 233 dog. They win 1-0. Let's go back to our chart that had basically a 45% chance of winning. So one of the secrets, and I'll tell you this, I'm going back to only playing home teams. Now, there are 2 exceptions to this rule. I'm not going to discuss that here, proprietary information, but for the most part, that's one way to improve your soccer handicapping, because if the statistical property is home teams win more than any other side, how do you use that statistical property to your advantage? You just play home teams. So then it would almost be, if we're just playing home teams and we're flipping that coin every time, it's going to hit 45%, 49, 50, 54%, 40, 44, 45, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason I have the green highlighted, I'll make this point, and this was something that I discovered in doing classes model. The old way I ran this model, classes model, and this is incorrect, by the way, is I looked at it and said, okay, if this is an A class team, they should beat the B class, the C class, and the D class. Technically on paper, that would be true. You saw the other chart, A class teams winning 65%. But the problem with doing that is that the A classes are going to be what? They're going to be extremely overvalued. So you'll find a ton of value in the lower classes playing each other. So when you have a C class playing a B class, more than likely the B class will be slightly overvalued, and you'll get a ton of value playing on that C class. So that C class there, you can see going against B class winning 43% of the time. And ironically, well, that's not ironic. A C against a C about 45%. Super fascinating. And take a look, even going down here to the bottom, D and A class. Look at that one. 35% D class probability of winning over an A class. An A class winning over a D class away only 33%. Okay, now let's apply this to yesterday. So we had This is from Champions League, my model for Champions League. Same deal, classes model. So we had a C class team at home against an A class away, a C class at home against an A class away. So what would be the wager? This would technically be a no play, but if you were going to play it, you would either play, believe it or not, the draw line, or you would play the C class because there's more value. That first game with Celtic, that was a draw. I think they won. That was a draw in regulation. I think the C class won in overtime. And then this next one here, I can't remember what happened, but A didn't win. That was a draw as well. And then, of course, the only match that won was the one that we had actually selected as a play. We had two B class teams playing. Obviously, that would favor the B if it was a dog, by the way. Again, we don't lay juice on the B class. There is an exception where I will lay some juice on the A class, but for the most part, it's just going to be primarily dogs. So super fascinating, right? It gave me a ton of clarity in how to handicap this. And let's go ahead and take a look at the entire log. We'll scroll all the way down here to the bottom. So this sample size was from 8:15 all the way until, I think, Sunday. Yep. Or maybe, no, we factored in, I think, 8:25. So through 8:25. And the model, 30 wins, 32 losses, net units, 18.11 units. We average per win 1.67 units, and per losses, we only average -1, even though there is some examples where we were laying some juice, but none of those heavy favorites lost. Long term probably would. But man, super excited about this. And next thing we're going to segue into is I'm going to talk about a Monte Carlo simulation. And all this is new for me as well, because the traditional way of running a back test to test longevity, to know if your model is going to be profitable, I would have to build the power rankings for soccer via the model. Let's say I was running power rankings for July the 22nd. I would need to run the model up until July 21st with all the stats I was using, and then manually enter everything and then check the results on 7/22 and keep doing that over and over and over. That's still an effective way to do it, to back test, but it's very time consuming and very difficult to build a large sample size. What a Monte Carlo sim is, and we'll pull up this next slide, a Monte Carlo sim basically simulates if this model would be profitable long term. Factors in variance, standard deviation. Standard deviation is basically a fancy word for margin of error. And to give an example of margin of error means like, well, let's look at my Major League Baseball model from 2 years ago. It hit 43 units. And then last year, it was 35 units. And this year, if I was actually calculating units, I think it's down like 6 or 7 units. So that's what margin of error basically means. So a Monte Carlo system, again, this isn't perfect, but it's a very effective way to know if your model would be profitable long term. And we'll walk through this as well. So what I asked it to do was simulate. And again, you don't even have to know you don't even have to know code if you're using ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, one of these AI services. You can just simply ask it to run it. So I said, hey, run this at 40% win ratio, because at the time we were at 50%. So I guess we're at about 48% now. 1.67 units per win, averaging -1 units per loss. So it said EV, expected value for 1,000 plays, is 68 units. And the reason I used 1,000 plays, I was guessing that's probably how many we would wager per year, more or less. So it showed deterministic expectation, 68 units, runs 20,000 trials. It guessed it at about, meaning like it would average about 67 units. Their deviation, 41 units. In like variance, we can expect it to hit 41 units. I think that's the interpretation of that. And then what was very interesting about this, it gives a 5th to 95 percentile, meaning at the extreme, what would be the best this model could do. And this looked realistic to me. At best, it could pump out 134 units. Worst case scenario, meaning it was in the lower 5% percentile, it would be chance of it finishing negative is basically 5%. So if you have a model running a Monte Carlo system, where it's showing, hey, profitability over 1,000 wagers is about 67 units, potential 134, chance of being negative is 5%. That's a pretty good model without running a quote standard back test. And it says it right here in plain English, over 1,000 bets, you're almost always finish positive. clustered around plus 68 units, only about 1 in 20 seasons, and down due to variance. Now what I asked it to do, I figured what would be the worst case scenario. I asked it to run the same Monte Carlo system back test, but run it at a 38% win ratio, because I figured that might be the worst it would hit. Because I feel like long term, this will be over 40%. It's not going to be 48% for sure. So it calculated running the same Monte Carlo sim at 38%, which would be 380 wins, 620 losses for a net units considerably lower than the other one at 14 units. Standard deviation, 40.8 units. It said the 95 percentile, meaning it has the potential, even at 38%, to create 81 units, and the 5% negative to be down minus 52 units. Chance of finishing negative, 36%. And then it sums it up, which is great about using an AI service. At 38% win rate, the system is still slightly profitable on paper, 14 units over 1,000 plays. But because variance is high, you've got about a 1 in 3 chance of ending a 1,000 play season down. The spread is big. In some years, you'd lose minus 50 units. Others, you'd win 80 units. And again, that's predicated on a finishing at 38%. But the big takeaway from this now, without doing a back test, I have a realistic understanding. I have knowledge. I'm educated about the potential of this particular model and also the downside of it as well. So realistically, I would ask myself in layman's terms, even though I'm super excited about the results we had and the results we had with, let's see if I can pull this back up, with this particular model, 30 and 32, 18-point units, very small sample size. Obviously, I wouldn't finish that. But based on me factoring in the statistical properties, do I believe this could hit 40% long term? And the answer to that question is yes, I do. Because if you're hitting 40% long term, which I think is a realistic goal, then this model can definitely be profitable. And I think it's even better than what we came up with before. When the very first model I built back in 2019, I was just infatuated, which is crazy to think I've been grinding on soccer for 6 years. I was so infatuated with all these dogs cashing. I would see a plus 34 dog, a plus 500 dog. And it was just exciting because that's always been my approach to handicapping. In fact, my career, I'm probably 52% if you add up all the wagers, but I play a lot of dogs and profitable that way. And I just think it's easier to incorporate moneyline dogs into your handicapping, which allows you to be profitable, albeit with a lower win percentage, as opposed to the classic minus 110. If you're just playing minus 110 sides or minus 110 juice with spreads, you got to hit, 54%, 55% long-term to be profitable. Extremely difficult to do. Now, one other thing I will add, and this is a breakthrough that I learned with soccer this week and also with college football. You have to create a relationship or have to assess that's a better way to say it. You have to assess the relationship between your model that indicates a play and the books line. And I'll give a big shout out to Mars, who helped me with very brilliant former client. He helped design the sample size for Major League Baseball, very cerebral. And he basically explained this to me. And I kind of learned this the hard way. Let's say if I'm looking at a soccer play and it indicates, okay, this is a play here, C playing a B side, the B's overvalued, we play the C's at home, but the line is plus 400. At that point, it would not be a play because we're looking at the relationship, meaning if I'm saying this should be a play and we look in the books line as plus 400, if we just use some basic knowledge of handicapping understanding, how often does a plus 400 dog cash? Extremely low win percentage for a plus 400 dog. So in that case, we basically cut it off. So in this particular model, I'm playing everything up to plus 299. So once the model indicates it's a play, and let's say it's a plus 325 dog, we would eliminate that from our handicapping, because the higher, dogs are, the more difficult they are to cash. Even though some of those probably could cash, I would say long term, all it would do is just eat up your ROI and just force you to lay out more capital than you needed, especially when we've looked at this particular system. Playing from plus 299 or less is extremely profitable. So the key takeaway there to learn, if you're building models, you always want to look at your line and compare that to the books line. If you have somebody favored to win in college football, you're like, hey, I think this team can win. My line is -2. And you look at the books line, and the books line has them at plus 27. I mean, they're basically telling you, hey, your line's off considerably. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule, but always you want to look at the line, assess the sportsbook line to your line, and see if there's some takeaways that you can take for that, because there's always a possibility your model could actually be wrong and how you handicap that game. So creating that relationship will help you eliminate some games and stay out of some losses. All right, let's move over to college football. College football kicked off this past week. We had one play via the model. I'll show it to you right here. Idaho State playing UNLV. We run the same type classes model. We had Idaho State. I got a new class this year, an E-class team playing a C class, and generally, more or less, you can factor somewhere between 7 points to 10 points per class. So if you have an A and a C class, that line's probably going to be, 14 to 18, somewhere in there difference. Same here with a 2 class. It should be, a max of 3 touchdowns. So this line realistically probably should have been UNLV minus 21. They were at home, Idaho State on the road. That line was plus 31. I think we played it at 31. Yeah, we got some closing line value there. And I think it ended up closing majority of books at like 30.5. And believe it or not, Idaho State almost pulled out the win. They were winning late. That was a fun game to watch. They dominated there earlier. UNLV came back. But the point is, a C-class team, even though they're playing an E-class team, somebody that they're significantly better than, the odds of them covering a 30.5 nut, extremely, extremely rare. So super excited about this classes model. Let me give you a preview of it, and we'll take a look at some of this log from last year. So let's take a look at, and a lot of things I learned with soccer, I started to apply here with college football. And again, my brain's fried, so I'm trying to remember some of this from this morning. Memphis UTSA, and I took some sample games from last year. I'm not sure which week this is. You had Memphis was a B class. Texas San Antonio was a C class. However, the C class team is at home. So what does that do to the line? That means these teams are closer than the actual 7-point separation. So UTSA was plus 7. So that would be a play via the model. SA wins 44-36. And yes, because they were home teams win 70% of the time. I would have played that on the money line. Take a look at Toledo, Eastern Michigan, the next game. Same deal there. You have a C-class team on the road playing a D-class team. Separation is normally should be probably right around where the line was, but you have the C-class on the road having to cover a 10-point nut. So that's going to reduce that spread significantly. And then you have Eastern Michigan, although they lost, that covered the spread. Now, once that spread gets above 7 points, I would probably, with college football, home or away, I would take the points there. And let's scroll down and take a look at a few more here. Oh, I think this is a really good example. Let's look at this one. Really good. I can't believe I missed this one. Stanford and NC State. So we had Stanford as a D-class team. NC State was a B-class team. So a B-class team, 2 classes is going to be what? It's going to be anywhere from, 10 points all the way up to probably a touchdown. Then we factor in home field advantage is worth something. Home teams win a majority of the time in college football. And don't forget this line, teams that win also cover a majority of the time. And this is more true in NFL than it is in college football, but still something to think about. So if you're new to this, really, in essence, all you're doing is picking winners. So if you can pick majority winners, majority of the time, you should be profitable, because if that team wins, chances are that they're going to cover. So in handicapping this game, you just ask yourself, will NC State beat Stanford? Yes, they probably should. Well, if they're going to beat them, then they probably will cover a large majority of the time. Teams that win cover a majority of the time. So this line was minus 9.5. So we're getting value there with the home side. They went outright 59-28. And let's scroll down and look at a few more of these. All right, here's a really good one. Old Dominion and App State. And we just saw this with soccer. Same exact example from soccer, but we're applying it to college football. We had Old Dominion as a C-class team. App State was a C-class team, so they're, quote, even. However, we have to factor in home field advantage. Home team's going to win 70% of the time. So that's an advantage there for App State. App State was plus 3. So if we play App State on the money line, that would have been a win. And then scroll down here. We'll just look at this UCLA-Nebraska game. Check this one out. This is good because this is right where the cutoff should be. Both of these are B-class teams, very similar, but now you have Nebraska here trying to cover more than that 7-point spread. So generally what you want to do is only play those play the home side on the equal class if it's less than 7, especially on the home side. So you're getting a little bump there with the 7.5. So that would be a play in favor of UCLA. And then of course, same deal here with the next one. Kansas State, A-class team. Houston was a B-class team. That's going to narrow that gap between the A and the B because Houston is at home. Houston getting 13.5 points, and they actually win that one outright. So really super excited. I'm still working on this guide for clients and should have this out tomorrow. So if you're a client, you'll have access to the entire explanation of how we're going to handicap. And if you want access to these power rankings, like you saw on that previous page, access to our soccer plays each day, very inexpensive to join. You don't have to file bankruptcy. You don't have to get permission from your wife. It's $50 a month. There's a link to join in the description of this video. You can also get access to all my plays. That's $100 a month. And if you join for the year, that's the best value. Instead of paying $100 a month, you save about $600 on the yearly subscription. You pay $4.99 one time, gives you access to everything on the site for a solid year. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in to this podcast. Hopefully we'll be back tomorrow night, Thursday, for a college football preview. Have a great Wednesday. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.